ousted Liz Cheney and her new replacement, Elise Stefanik, spar over former President Trump's role in the party.
There's no question but that at this moment, the majority of the Republican Party is not where I am. But it's my responsibility as an elected official, it's my responsibility as a leader to lead and to tell the truth.
She is looking backwards. Republicans are looking forward. We are unified, and we are talking about conservative principles. President Trump is an important voice in the Republican Party.
And the Arizona election recount led by a Republican Senate, several GOP officials are now questioning the effort and Trump's recent comments about it. One Arizona county chair denounced the recount as dangerous, and a county election official slammed Trump as unhinged for falsely claiming that the entire database of Maricopa County in Arizona has been, quote, deleted. Here to talk all about this, Kurt Bardella, former spokesperson for the House Oversight Committee and contributor to the Los Angeles Times, Amanda Renteria, former national political director for Hillary for America and CEO of Code for America. Welcome to you both. Kurt, I want to start with you because, you know, we've played a bunch of the sound from Elise Stefanik's interview from earlier today where she talked a lot about how the Republican Party was unified. We've covered that. It's not. It doesn't seem to be. But then she talks about how much of the Republican Party is based on conservative principles, which also is head-scratching. Considering the fact that the decision that they made about Liz Cheney has nothing to do with conservative principles. It's all about for or against Donald Trump.
Well, it's laughable for them to talk about wanting to move forward when the entire rhetoric coming from Donald Trump and the Republican Party is all about relitigating the last election. I mean, if conservative values were really the linchpin, the measuring stick and barometer for this Republican Party, Liz Cheney would still be the Republican chairwoman conference. But she's not. She got thrown out because of telling the truth about January 6th and telling the truth about Donald Trump. All the while, in real time, at this moment, we see an effort underway by the Arizona Republican Party to undo the election results. I mean, you can't say with a straight face that you're about a party that wants to move forward when right now in Arizona, they're recounting ballots from more than 6 months ago. That is the biggest lie I have ever heard. The idea that this party is somehow about forward motion and conservative principles is total BS. This party is about one thing and one thing only, and that's lying about the election and undermining democracy.
So let me read from your op-ed in the LA Times. The gravest threat now to America's freedom comes not from outside our borders, but from those who doubt that democracy works at all. If we saw a political faction in another country repudiate a free election, as the GOP is doing right now, American diplomats would be calling out that crime, Kurt.
Well, listen, we heard for the better part of the 2000s, the Republican Party rhetoric and orthodoxy about the war on terror and fear about terrorists from abroad, the threat from abroad. But in reality, the threat that we are facing right now at home in our own backyard from one of the two major political parties in this country has put democracy on its edge. We are teetering very, very close right now. I don't think people realize what's happening. But what we have seen now is a Republican Party that even on the day of the insurrection, that night went back into the chambers of Congress and voted against approving a free and fair election. This is a three-part play that we're seeing right now. Act one was the November election. Act two is the 2022 midterms. And if Republicans somehow get control of one of the two chambers of Congress, I guarantee you in 2024, if they don't like the results of the election, they will not certify them. And they will create a constitutional crisis, the likes of which we have never seen, putting democracy on edge and under threat in a way that it never was during the attacks of al-Qaeda, during everything that we experienced in the 2000s, all of the alarmist rhetoric we heard from Republicans about terror and war and terrorism. Well, guess what? The threat we are seeing right now from the Republican Party is far bigger than any of that.
Amanda, I want to read from the Washington Post here, talking about the fact that Republicans are basically twisting in knots to avoid saying that Biden actually won this election fairly, whether they believe it or not. The Washington Post writing this: Republicans are still embracing or at least tolerating falsehoods about the election, setting it as a red line for those who want prominence in what essentially remains Trump's party. Party leaders say they want to focus on the future and not relitigate the election, but their allegiance to Trump means they can't get away from his focus on the past. I mean, the former president just yesterday putting a statement out, because of course he can't say it on Twitter or Facebook or any other social media site, saying the election was stolen once again out of nowhere. What does this say about the Republican Party?
Well, I think this, I mean, people have to really understand what just happened.
Yeah.
This was a vote for leadership, right? It wasn't just saying we disagree with Congresswoman Cheney. It is now putting a structure in place to execute on what Trump believes. And, you know, I think back to insurrection, and early in those early days, you had McCarthy on the floor saying maybe, you know, Trump had something to do with this. You had McConnell's wife resign from the administration. And so folks wondered, well, is this going to be a coming together of the country? What we just saw is a vote to say, in fact, we are going to side with Trump. The struggle is not over from what we saw in the insurrection. And Kurt is right. This is setting up is something far worse than this country has ever seen. And that's the part that is so difficult at this moment right now, seeing what's happening on the Republican side, having Liz Cheney come out and say something and have the Republican Party say, we're going to go in a different direction. So anyone that thought the election of the last cycle was tough, 2022 is on the horizon, 2024 is on the horizon. And what this is setting up for is a far more intense kind of situation where people used to be, it was a madman. And what's happened is now that kind of culture, style, and leadership has been industrialized within the Republican Party.
Okay, I want to get into what you just said, Amanda, because you kind of put something out there that I need you to expand on, which is far worse than we have ever seen. We've seen a lot of bad stuff over the last 4 years, and we saw a lot of bad stuff on January 6th. How bad can it, will it get, and what are you saying?
Yeah, so here's what I'm worried about, which is now you have Republican leadership, right? You have just moved out any dissenting voice. You have now Republican leadership behind Trump, unified, saying this is what we are going to do. And you hear Liz Cheney saying, wow, the Republican Party has gone away. We have not seen a Republican body in this way act like Trump and begin to embed a coordinated, organized fashion all across the country. You've seen state after state, Georgia, Arizona, and now what the Republican Party is saying is we're going to take that kind of culture, leadership, and style at the highest levels of government and execute on a strategy. That, to me, is one of the scariest things we all have to think about as we think about the next election and the future of this country.
So what could happen? I need to know examples of what could actually happen here.
Yeah, so what we saw was an insurrection, and the Republican Party was saying, wait, maybe not. Now you have wide open gates to say, come on in. We're going to change the way the systems are. We're going to go down to capitals and change the way the laws are. We're going to actually, by law, exclude people. And we're going to allow Trump to, again, govern the party from the outside in. What this means for our democracy and Constitution is it completely undoes the pieces of our democratic institutions that have made peaceful transitions possible in this country. And as the world looks at America, what I worry about is we were hanging on by a string on January 6th. Now, what does this say as we go into the 2020 and 2024 election for how we're going to be able to keep it together when the leadership of a Republican Party, not just one man, but the leadership and the power of these institutions are now where Trump is?
Kurt, final word.
What you're going to see is when you have one of the two political parties make excuses, apologize, rewrite history for the violent insurrection effort on January 6th, you're going to see more of that. When the Republican Party sits up there in a congressional hearing like they did this week and say, oh, it was just like any kind of tourist day, you're telling these people to keep doing it, to do it more, to get more violent because the Republican Party will run cover for you. They are the getaway driver for these Democratic arsonists.
Kurt Bardella, Amanda Renteria, thank you both, guys. Appreciate it. We're following some more breaking news, everybody, from the